Indians had sent 3 medical missions to assist the Ottoman soldiers who were facing the brunt of a brutal assault waged on them from the Balkan Confederacy. These belligerent Balkan states were part of the Ottoman Empire, but with the active support of the Russians, they were attacking troops as well as the Muslim civilian population in their territories. One of these missions was sent from the UK in 1911. This mission first visited the Tripoli war front following the unprovoked attack by Italy on the Libyan shores. Libya then was a part of the Ottoman Empire. After completing their work in Libya, this medical mission went straight to the Balkan war front in 1912. The mission was primarily funded by Indian notables like the Aga Khan and the then Nizam of Hyderabad. Justice Syed Amir Ali was the moving force behind this mission. This team consisted of young volunteers from wealthy families who were studying in London. They bore all expenses by themselves, including the costs of the Egyptian physician Salim Bey to accompany them to Istanbul. They worked at the Hyder Pasha Military Hospital at first and then served in the front near Omerli. The Bombay medical team, created with funds that were collected by the Islamic Youth Foundation and the Zia-e-Islam Council, was the other medical mission that visited Turkey. They arrived in Istanbul on December 17, 1912 and were placed at the Red Crescent Darul Funun Charitable Hospital. They stayed for over a month and treated about 100 inpatients. This story, however, focuses on another group of young Muslim men who traveled from the subcontinent to Ottoman Turkey, braving the Balkan War. The group included persons from, quote, cultured, middle and higher classes representing the flower of the Mohammedan youth who are fully alive to the responsibilities and nature of the work with which they are entrusted. End quote. This introduction may lead one to think that we would be talking about a group of foreign fighters who readily join battles in foreign lands in our day and age. While we do see various groups traveling across borders to partake in the so-called jihad declared by a figure who does not have the title nor the authority of a caliph, or whose own claim to caliphate would not be recognized by an overwhelming majority of the Muslim world. These jihadists, awkwardly and perhaps erroneously called as such, see the Muslim and non-Muslim worlds to be locked in an eternal animosity, and they adopt war or terror as a method. Of course, this is not peculiar to the Muslim world. One is reminded of the Orthodox Christian fighters who poured into Bosnia-Herzegovina to slaughter the Muslims, or the Buddhist monks in Myanmar who incited anti-Muslim pogroms. The story we are narrating involves young men who had strong pan-Islamic ideological convictions, but whose vision or method was not war or eternal conflict between the Muslim and non-Muslim world. Obviously, we hesitate when calling them pan-Islamists. Pan-Islamism is a very tired concept. It always meant different things to different people and was always attended by a certain degree of hype. In its original form, it derives from the idea that Muslims are part and parcel of one ummah or nation. In the context of India, At the turn of the previous century, the feeling of solidarity with fellow Muslims was the manifestation of the strong pan-Islamist sentiment of a mobilized Indian Muslim civil society entering gradually into a political space. Ironically, the initial reaction of the British rulers of India was rather supportive of the pan-Islamist movement. After all, the British Empire did leverage the help of the Ottoman Caliph to calm the Indian Muslim population during the 1857 uprising. But this could work only as long as the British Empire supported the Ottoman Empire. When Britain changed course, which it did after the Crimean War in the late 19th century, and then in fact later joined in the feast of the assault against the Ottoman Empire, Pan-Islamism became a problem for its own survival as an empire. As such, the Pan-Islamist movement grew from pro-Turkish to anti-British, from pro-Caliph to pro-independence. There was in no small degree the existence of strong feelings towards the fate of the Ottoman Empire among the Hindu community as well, which is very much understudied. The mission reached Istanbul on the last day of 1912 and stayed continually in Turkey until late June 1913. In the process, the medical mission established 2 field hospitals and conducted other humanitarian and political work with support of the Ottoman authorities. The mission's activities in Turkey were reported regularly through letters sent by Mukhtar Ahmad Ansari to the editor of the news weekly called Comrade, edited by no less than Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar, who was the main player behind the mission. The mission's journey actually began days after the onset of the Balkan Wars in 1912, when the charismatic Shaukat Ali made an appeal to collect funds to send a team of doctors to the Ottoman Empire in order to treat its soldiers. The earlier surprise attack by Italy on the Libyan territories of the Ottoman Empire had already provoked significant reaction back in India, and the most recent news of the coordinated aggression by a group of Balkan countries with a volubly anti-Muslim and nationalistic agenda created a furor in India. As far as the Ottoman Empire was concerned, the Balkan Wars were nothing less than an utter disaster. It came to represent the latest episode in the drawn-out assault on the Muslim Turks and their state from European powers, large and small. For the Muslims of India, who were following very closely the events unfolding in this war, it was yet another aggression against the Muslim world. Already defeated by European colonialism, the Indian Muslims and non-Muslims came together in support of the appeal to send aid. In a matter of days, a team of doctors were joined by a group of volunteers with or without prior medical or paramedical training to serve in Turkey. These were raised from voluntary contributions of the wealthy and the poor alike. The elegant and diplomatic professional physician Dr. Mukhtar Ahmad Ansari was chosen to lead the medical team to Turkey. Dr. Ansari was the first Indian to be admitted as a resident medical officer at the famous Charing Cross Hospital in London. More than a month into the heavy fighting in the Balkans, Dr. Ansari assembled 8 fully qualified medical men, 5 with European qualifications. 3 of these doctors were to join the mission in Istanbul straight from London. Additionally, there were 8 dressers and 9 male nurses to travel with this mission from India. There was a ready supply of volunteers to take part in this mission. Chaudhry Khaliquzzaman, in his memoirs, wrote, "I was playing tennis in front of my room. I heard Rahman Siddiqui calling me, accompanied by a well-dressed, handsome gentleman standing by his side. I was introduced to Dr. Ansari. I expressed my joy and admiration for him having undertaken the responsibility of leading the medical mission. He told me that he had come to Aligarh to find some young men to go with him to help discharge his duties. By the evening, I had made up my mind. Several others were to join the mission from the Aligarh College. Dr. Ansari's mission, though not the only one, was one that became particularly revered and trusted even by the Turkish authorities and seems to have overshadowed the others. Because of the letters sent by Dr. Ansari to Comrade. The letters were also instrumental in Muhammad Ali's own efforts to rally continued support and provide essential feedback to the masses in India, who contributed morally and financially to the mission's success. The uniforms of the mission were selected with particular attention and purpose. Dr. Ansari makes a particular note of the Jodhpur breeches, which have been, open quote, selected not only from the point of view of comfort and utility, but also to impart to the mission uniform a distinctively Indian character. He decided not to carry medical supplies or instruments from India to Turkey. Instead, he sent a list to the Indian Muslim jurist and political leader Sayyid Amir Ali, who was then in London, giving him full particulars of the quality of instruments, appliances, dressings, disinfectants and other items in order to be sent directly to Istanbul as to reach there before the team. The journey of the medical mission from UP to the port of Bombay was nothing short of a triumphal procession. A huge crowd of well-wishers saw the train off from Lucknow, with poems, prayers and tears. The Venerable Shibli Nomani was there at the station himself, and Maulana Muhammad Ali was also to escort the mission by train all the way to Bombay. A similar reception took place along the train's route to Bombay at Bhopal. A remarkable incident which transpired in the Lucknow railway station is recorded by Sayyid Sulaiman Nadwi in his biography on Allama Shibli. He writes, there was a big age gap between Dr. Ansari and the Maulana. The former was young while the latter had stepped into old age. Despite this difference in age, my eyes witnessed a moving scene at the Lucknow railway station when Dr. Ansari was leaving Bombay en route to Constantinople. Many local dignitaries had also come to see him off. Dr. Ansari was standing at the door of the railway compartment. Maulana Shibli was standing on the platform, looking up to him. Just as it was time to say the final goodbye, the head of the great scholar that had refused to bow before powerful tyrants bent down and kissed the boots of Dr. Ansari. Tears of joy cleaned the dust off the boots. The train moved on, taking with it the precious jewels of Islamic honor and dignity. Quotes closed. The mission left Bombay after a very hearty farewell aboard the Italian vessel Sardinia on 15th December 1912. They were to pass through Aden and reach Suez on the morning of 26th December. From there, the mission took the railway to Alexandria through Ismailia. In Alexandria, wherever the mission went, they were met with cheering crowds. Their departure from the docks, this time aboard SS Romania to Istanbul, was another spectacular event. Dr. Ansari writes, there were banners bearing the red crescent carried by the crowds, and burning speeches were made by several persons denouncing the atrocities of the Balkan armies, and a poem in Arabic was read by a gentleman in our honor. Then began the loud, lusty and continuous cheering from the crowds, who continuously kept it up until our boat was out of sight. And not being content with that, several boats full of people followed our steamer for a long distance, cheering us and singing Arabic songs. The medical mission reached Istanbul early in the dull, cloudy and misty morning of 30th December 1912. The mission found a large crowd of Turkish people joined by a guard of honor and a military band waiting for them. The reception party was led by the Inspector General of the Red Crescent. The same morning, the team was taken to their place of stay, the Kadirga Hospital, where they stayed until they were deployed to the border. At the reception accorded to the Indian Medical Mission at the Kadirga Hospital, Basim Umar Pasha, the doyen of the Turkish Red Crescent Society, remarked that the Indian mission was the foster father of the Turkish Red Crescent Society. Dr. Ansari explains how they set up the first tent. He narrates, first, with the help of soldiers, the mission had to make a small bridge over a stream that separated the railway line from the hospital site. None of the members had previous experience in pitching a tent, and it took a great deal of effort, time and discussion to set up the first tent. By the end of the evening, we succeeded, he wrote, only in pitching up one double tent and a bill tent. But he quickly added in his letter, it would have done your heart a lot of good if you had seen the members of your mission working in the teeth of a most bitterly cold wind and the mud almost knee-deep. Here at least, there was no distinction between the doctor and the dresser, everyone hammering the pegs, fixing the poles or spreading the canvas and doing the work like real enthusiasts. 2 members had to return because they fell ill. The news of Caliph Sultan Muhammad Rashid V actually agreeing to receive the medical mission came as a pleasant shock to them. Dr. Ansari was to recount the meeting with the Sultan as the greatest event of their stay in Turkey. Dr. Ansari presented his team one by one to the Sultan, who graciously bowed as each member was presented. After the introduction, the Sultan expressed his appreciation for the mission's assistance to the Ottoman soldiers during the Balkan Wars. Dr. Ansari wrote, His Majesty was visibly touched as he spoke these words. He invoked God's blessings on the members of the mission for their work of mercy and asked us to convey to the Muslims of India the eternal gratitude of His Majesty and the Ottoman nation. The mission started wrapping up around the end of May. First, the Omreli hospital was closed and then the one in Çanakkale 2 days later. Before their closing, the hospitals had already started to extend outpatient services. They left Turkey with great pomp, just as they were received at the Istanbul docks. Dr. Ansari wrote, The mission departed with tearful eyes and sorrowful hearts, feeling that they were leaving their homes and family in Turkey, only to go to another home and family in India. The team was overwhelmed by the touching expression of fraternal regard and brotherly feelings exhibited by their Ottoman brothers. Not all members of the mission actually returned to India. Some stayed back, and among those who stayed back, one has a very interesting story. It's the story of Abdurrahman Peshawari, who joined the Turkish armed forces after the mission left. After he left the army as a colonel, he was spotted by Ataturk himself and made Turkey's ambassador to Afghanistan. When the team arrived in Bombay, they were given a rousing reception. Incidentally, Maulana Shibli was present in Bombay during those days. Promptly, he went to receive Dr. Ansari and the delegation at the docks. As Dr. Ansari was getting down from the ship, the Allama stepped forward to kiss his feet. However, this time, Dr. Ansari did not allow him to do so. The Allama told him, "These are not your feet. They are feet representing the sufferings of Islam. Mujassama-e-Ghurbat. During the meeting held to honor these brave sons of India, Allama Shibli read out this soul-stirring poem in honor of Dr. Ansari and his team. We offer our thanks to Allah, the singular Al-Bari, on the safe return of the delegation of Ansari. You travelled several thousand miles to serve our brethren. This indeed is true Islamic spirit. This is manifest compassion. Forsaking your country, parting from family, crossing a vast distance courageously, by God's grace you did endure the travails admirably. Athwart your mission there was great furor, could be heard voices of anguish and pains of heart sore. The grieving eyes of relatives, their piercing, longing gaze, the outpourings of anguished hearts, and soaring flames of filial love to put you in a daze. None can obtain, even in their dreams, such good fortune, dear. Your night vigils for the sick and injured, which you did endure. Seen you have the Muslims rise and fall, seen you have the turning of tide stall. How can the dwellers of Hindustan fathom your heart's agony? Seen you have since increasing tyranny. You have heard the heart-wrenching lament of the orphans. Seen you have the unhappy faces of destitute widows. The burning alive of the dwellers after plundering their shelters. Seen you have the new norms of the Western powers. It's you who have sutured the wounds of the warriors. Seen you have the blood stains on the garments of the martyrs. Your eyes that observed sights full of admonition thus to us address. Seen we have various kinds of distress. Seen we have eyes embellished like scattered pearls. Seen we have the rose-red cheeks of the martyrs. It would be no astonishment should bounce back the gauntlet after sinking. Seen we have, after all, fortunes churning. If acceptable to Providence, the supplication of a person elderly, these then are hands raised in prayer, and this then is Shibli Nomani. And on the day they returned to Delhi, the 10th of July 1913, Mukhtar Ansari and his team were mobbed by milling crowds at the railway station. From the Delhi railway station, they were taken in a procession, escorted by mounted young Muslims to the Delhi Jamia Masjid. Over 30,000 people who lined the streets along the designated route raised slogans welcoming Dr. Ansari and his team. Merchants had decorated their shops along the route and had made arrangements for distribution of iced sherbets and milk. The procession stopped at the foot of the vast flight of steps leading to the eastern gate of the Jamia Masjid. As they entered the courtyard of the mosque, they were greeted with a loud applause by the thousands of Muslims of Delhi and hundreds who had come from other places. They were all inspired by a single sentiment and filled with a single aim to do honor to the men who had made sacrifices in the cause of Islam. The works carried out by the medical mission in its 2 hospitals, along with the financial assistance sent to the Turkish Red Crescent from India, was much appreciated by the Turks. The venue of one of the field hospitals in a village named Omreli was renamed Hindiya Koi. These young men later became passionate fighters for India's independence from the British. Gandhi had rightly remarked about Dr. Ansari, "He is our right arm." In the words of Burak Akchapar, The Indian Medical Mission was neither the first nor the last manifestation of the Indian Muslims' passionate support for Turkey. This story began as early as mid-19th century and it has continued ever since. The mission did keep alive and indeed augmented existing interests, links and sympathies with Turkey. Dr. Ansari himself announced later that this aspect was their most important achievement. In conclusion, it could be said, they went to save the honor and the pride of the Muslim world. What you saw this far was the co-documentary concerning the Indian Medical Mission sent to Ottoman Turkey. This epilogue serves to cover those aspects of the medical mission led by Dr. Mukhtar Ahmad Ansari that were not covered in the main documentary. These events will prove to be very interesting to viewers. Medical units were also being recruited for the Gallipoli campaign. The Gallipoli campaign was part of the Ottoman strategy to contain the advancing Bulgarians. The Bulgarians were part of the Balkan Alliance, along with Montenegro, Greece and Serbia. Mukhtar Ahmad receives a telegram from Istanbul inviting the Indian Medical Mission to take part in the rather secret campaign that hoped to stem the assaults. Dr. Ansari was jubilant. This news ought to immensely please you, he wrote to Maulana Muhammad Ali, as ours is the only mission out of the 7 which has been given this great honor and distinction of accompanying Anwar Bey. The medical mission, consisting of some members of the main mission, actually sailed with the amphibious forces aboard the boat Cambridge, leaving Istanbul on February 18th with some 300 packages of medical material. They marched with the advancing Ottoman army. The initial expectations about the war were most positive, but it did not go as planned. Ansari put the blame, among other things, on the weather. He said the weather was not anywhere close to what the Indian Medical Mission had ever seen before. Here, he wrote, the wind seems to blow from every direction, all at once, and the flakes of snow pour down so thick that it is impossible to see more than a few yards ahead. It seems like a mixture of snow, fog and cyclone, and a few minutes of exposure, hands, feet, nose and ears will become numb and lifeless. The mission failed, but the Indian team was impressed nonetheless. Anyone who has seen the soldiers which comprise the present Turkish army, as I have had several occasions of seeing in the hospitals, would not doubt that Anatolian soldiers are about the only soldiers whose spirit would remain undaunted in spite of the severest winter and the greatest hardships that any army could be exposed to. Among the noteworthy achievements of the mission was the high standards maintained by the entire medical team. Writing about the results of the Omerli Field Hospital, Dr. Ansari wrote, the Omerli sections of our mission have broken all records. Their heroic adherence to their duties, in spite of the bitterness and the severest winter, when their tents were often completely snowed up and their camp was one mass of snow and mud, when the Turks themselves would not venture out of their houses, has been rewarded with the splendid record of one single death out of a total of 310 patients. Going beyond treating of the wounded and the sick, the Indian mission, who had encountered many Turks fleeing from their homes in the Balkans, were determined to help rehabilitate them as well. In his letter dated 30th December 1912, Dr. Ansari wrote about meeting around 1,000 Turkish refugees of all ages. He related the reports he had gathered about the atrocities perpetrated against the Turkish residents from the Balkans. He recounts that the sick and the wounded were thrown off the trains and that the non combatants, including women and children, were murdered. Dr. Ansari wrote, "These scenes made us even more determined to do all that lay in our power to lessen the sufferings of our fellow Muslims in Turkey." Dr. Ansari's focus on the Balkan refugees remained all the way to the end of the stay in Turkey. In this context, he, towards the end of his term, when the two hospitals transitioned from treating those wounded in battles to providing care to the sick, reverted to work on resettling refugees. The Muhajirs from the Balkans gained priority in his eyes. Thus, by the April of 1913, Dr. Ansari relates his intention to make a tour of Anatolia in Izmir with Zafar Ali Khan and a representative of the Ottoman Red Crescent to select a suitable place for what he called the resettlement of the Turkish refugees from the Balkans. This resettlement plan, of course, required new funds in order to build a model village. It would serve about 1,000 to 1,500 immigrants, indeed a small number given the fact that scores of families were uprooted from their homes in the Balkan area. But it was his idea to build on the initial phase and turn it into something bigger with the establishment of an international Muslim cooperative league with 1 million shares to be sold to the Muslims of Turkey, India, Egypt, Morocco, Persia, and other Muslim countries. The object of this cooperative society would be to foster Muslim industries and to encourage industrial development in Turkey. The necessary official approvals were given in a speedy fashion by the Turkish authorities. Overall, his travels in Anatolia seem to have kind of reconfirmed the image that Ansari had in his mind about the value and promise of the Ottoman Empire and the land. He seems to have become even more aware of the stakes that were involved. As he wrote, "Many empires have risen, reached their zenith, decayed and disappeared before the very eyes of these unchanging mountains and rocks. It makes one wonder what fate awaits the only remaining Muslim state which now holds this historical place under its sway." The other project that the Indian Medical Mission initiated that was not directly related to addressing the problems caused by the Balkan Wars was the establishment of an international Muslim college by the name of Medina University. A large number of influential Turkish officials also showed keen interest in the project. Dr. Ansari wrote, "The Minister of Awqaf, Religious Endowments, showed a great amount of zeal. The Nizamnameh, or regulation, was discussed and sanctioned. Members of the Constitution Committee were appointed. Abdulaziz Shawesh, who is the soul of the movement, would probably be appointed principal of the university," he concluded. He asked Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar to help prepare the curriculum of the Medina University on the lines of the Aligarh Muslim University. He also listed Maulana Shibli Nomani as one of the personalities to be consulted in this regard. In Dr. Ansari's view, every Muslim would hail this university as the beginning of the great renaissance in the Islamic world. The project did not materialize, but the objective was to revive the fortunes of the Muslim world through education. Perhaps the many international universities that sprang up in Medina, Kuala Lumpur, Islamabad, and elsewhere in the 1980s can be said to be the fruition of Dr. Ansari's noble intentions. Another useful purpose that was served by the mission was to correct the erroneous portrayal of the Ottoman state as a failed state by the Western media. The mission found a state that was still functioning in full vigor, Dr. Ansari, among other things, wrote about the efficiency of the Ottoman Red Crescent Society. In one of his letters, Dr. Ansari compares what he saw during a train journey with his own experiences in India. He wrote, "Our train passed through the fertile valley of Seyhan. The reaping was done by means of modern machinery. In another place, one saw grain being cropped and separated from straw and husk by engine driven machinery. Indeed, all the agricultural operations here are carried on in the most modern and up to date manner. It makes one wonder, but some of the Indian journals have the audacity to call Turkey the most backward country when they must know that in India agriculture is still being carried on in the most primitive condition without the least improvement in the methods of agriculture for the last 150 years. I assure you," he wrote, "Adana could give many lessons to most of the up to date agricultural districts in India." For the Indian Muslims, assisting the Turks in their fight against the hegemony of the Western powers meant, in a sense, finding the fighting spirit in themselves. As Burak Akçapar observes, the unity of purpose in supporting the Ottoman Turks satisfied their elusive quest to find unity of purpose at home.